Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the first day of the FTP September 2023 meeting. Before we start, we'll have a couple of Zoom webinar reminders. So if you experience any Zoom technical issues, please call 1-888-799-9666 and choose option 2. Your audio will be streamed through your speakers. You can submit questions at any time using the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. You can also upvote and comment on others' questions. This webinar will be recorded and the slides and session summaries will be posted shortly after the event at the ftp.org. We also have a PDF example prompt that we'll be posting in the chat for you guys to open up when the time is right. So I'm going to pass it over to Maria Kozolka, our Executive Director, to give some opening remarks.
Thank you, Sarah. Good morning and welcome to the September virtual meetings of the FTP. We're so pleased by how many of you could join us for the virtual meetings this week. We anticipate nearly 700 virtual participants. We have a great program lined up for the next 3 days, so I hope we'll engage throughout that time. As you know, I'm approaching the 6-month mark as Executive Director of FTP. I've greatly appreciated the warm welcome and connecting with so many of you during this time. My focus has been to reach out to our committees and working groups to gain a deeper appreciation of the activities they are involved in and their impact on our strategic plan and future directions. One of the priorities I have had is to enhance our alignment with GWIR, the Government University Industry Research Roundtable, and the Policy and Global Affairs Division of the National Academies of Science, Engineering, and Medicine. As you know, the FTP is convened by the Policy and Global Affairs Division of the National Academies, and the FTP has been historically one of the working groups associated with GWIR. We are pleased to welcome Tom Arison, who works closely with us on the FTP NASM ties, and with Michael Nestor, who leads GWIR. Another major initiative of the FTP is our evaluation project. We have launched our first ever FTP evaluation to assess the FTP's programmatic and organizational efficacy, as well as our impacts across the landscapes of research policy and administration. One of the components of the evaluation will be to conduct a survey of representatives and meeting participants in October. Please stay tuned for that and help us by completing the evaluation survey when you receive it. We want to thank the Center for Evaluation Research from the University of Mississippi for implementing our evaluation under Sarah Mason's leadership as the director of the center. And also a big thanks to Jessica Osborne and Ashley Perry, who are also on the evaluation team. We also want to thank Robert Nobles from Emory University for spearheading this initiative, and to all of the members of the working group for their work to identify the evaluation team and contribute to the framework and goals of the process. We have more to share about outcomes. We will have more to share about outcomes in the future. In addition to this important project, we're continuing to make progress on demonstrations related to data management and sharing pilot that's being developed to address needs for our final NIH data management and sharing guidance that has been adopted. Also, research security support tools like the CUSP protocol and updating the audit clearinghouse. We're also working on assessing the management and technical needs of the FTP and working to identify solutions for connecting all of our representatives and participants to the activities that the organization undertakes. Along those lines, we are approaching the 3-year mark of Alex Albanek's first term as FTP Administrative Representative Co-Chair. This affords me the opportunity to thank Alex for her incredible work during her first term as co-chair, and in particular for helping me to work on the business of improving our FTP operations. Our operating guidelines allow co-chairs to serve for 2 terms, so I note that Alex is eligible to serve a second 3-year term. Our process supports her nomination as well as that of others for consideration by the membership. The nomination process will be followed by an online election with the co-chair's 3-year term to take effect in January 2024. My office will be working on implementing the election process this fall. Please stay tuned for announcements related to the nomination and election process. I would also like to express our gratitude to Stephanie Scott of Columbia University, Jamie Sprague of Cornell, Sarah Piechak, and the FTP website working group and the communications committee on the very soon to be launch of the new FTP website. Lastly, as you can imagine, it's a lot of work to organize our virtual engagement with all of you. So I want to acknowledge the people who make it happen. I want to thank Barbara Gardner of Tufts University, chair of the program committee, as well as all the committee members for the huge amount of time and effort contributed to make this such a strong program. Second, we once again owe a special thanks to our senior program coordinator, Sarah Piechak, for the invaluable role she has played in helping us to launch the virtual meeting. I now turn the conversation over to Alex Albanek and Michelle Masucci, the FTP co-chairs. Alex is the Associate Vice Provost for Research Administration at Johns Hopkins University, and Michelle is the Vice Chancellor for Research and Economic Development at the University System of Maryland, with faculty appointments at the University of Maryland and the University of Maryland, Baltimore County. I turn it over now to Alex.
Thanks, Maria, and good morning, everybody. Welcome. It's great to have such great turnout. And I also want to thank Maria for all of your hard work. It's been great to have you on board so that we can work towards moving these initiatives. So thank you so much for all you've done and what we will see in the future. And as you know, we also could not do the important work of FTP in order to strengthen the nation's research enterprise without the incredible contributions of our partners, and particularly our federal partners. As you may know, at our in-person meeting this past May, we held a special session with our federal participants where we were able to talk about ways to more deeply engage with our federal partners. Happy to announce that stemming from that, we will be announcing the next week or two the federal lead for FTP, a role that has not been filled since Debbie Raffy's retirement. We're really looking forward to having this role filled to help continue to develop our special role with our federal partners and to help us understand the current changes that may impact our institutions. Our federal partners work incredibly hard to work with our institutional members and all participants to ensure the highest quality and most impactful research structure. So we really do look forward to enhanced engagement. As you know, one of the areas that we've been working on is our approach for future meetings. And we are working towards a cadence that gives us 2 virtual meetings each year and 1 in person on an annual basis. So we're happy to announce that we do have our January virtual meeting dates. Please save the date, January 22nd to the 24th. And because we received such positive feedback about the Mayflower Hotel, we've committed to using that hotel for the next 2 May meetings. So the first, please save your date. It's May 22nd to 24th, 2024. In the meantime, we're going to continue to seek your feedback for different experiences with meetings and ways to deepen our engagement, including how we can leverage our partnership with the National Academies to convene specialized work in-person meetings with synchronous capabilities, which is made possible because of their amazing facilities. We do think that such targeted meetings will have the potential to really increase our effectiveness, move our projects forward more quickly and with greater engagement by our partners. As Maria mentioned, we have our evaluation in process, and we're very eager to receive the final report, which will provide us insights about the activities of this current phase 7 as we look towards planning in phase 8. And this will include revisiting our strategic plan, integrating the outcomes of our evaluation into our planning, and beginning our membership recruitment. Can't believe it's already been 3 years. It's just amazing. So we've made tremendous progress on expanding our tools for supporting activities through resourcing the organization at a higher level. In addition to hiring our new executive director, Maria, we also continue to seek ways to streamline operations so that we can ensure effective stewardship of our funding. As we mentioned, our communications committee has overseen and coordinated a massive strategic priority to re-envision and design our website, as well as other communications content delivery. And we've had the support of Vanguard. We really appreciate their partnership, and we're very much looking forward to sharing a debut of that new website later this meeting. Also on Thursday at 2 p.m., we will once again provide an opportunity for all of our committees to share their progress on their activities and accomplishments. And we look forward to a special, I mentioned that, a special demonstration of our website at that time. So we hope you'll tune in. As we continue to build our relationships that bind our organizations, we continue to seek new ideas for projects and demonstrations that can fill in the knowledge of best practices for research policy implementation, as well as ensure the highest quality research enterprise possible at a national level. So we do encourage you to continue to send us ideas, provide feedback when you receive our surveys, because we do listen and they are accounted for in some of our planning at the executive committee level. We're also looking to seek ways to move this agenda forward for our convening community, FTP and the broader research community, in order to continue involvement, not just from our federal partners, they're very important, but all institutions and agencies, whether or not they're members of FTP. So thank you, and I'm going to turn this over to Michelle. Michelle?
Thank you so much, Alex. I really appreciate it. I want to echo Maria's comments about how much I've appreciated working with you in your first term as co-chair. I think it's just incredible what your impact has been. And from the faculty perspective, we've especially appreciated all the outreach that you've done with us and the advocacy for our needs. I want to give a special welcome to all of the participants in the FTP virtual meetings. It was fantastic to see everybody in person in May, and it's great to be able to think about doing the same thing again in the coming year. So our virtual meetings are necessary, but we get to that in-person meeting, which is really exciting. I want to use today's intro just to give a special acknowledgement to our faculty representatives and participants at this meeting. We're a small minority of the participants, but I think we contribute a lot to the overall organization. I'm often asked about what that faculty role at the FTP is. And as you think about who you might like to engage from your institutions, for those institutions that are still seeking a faculty rep, perhaps I can give some insights about the invaluable role that we play in terms of research administration and effectiveness at our home institutions, and of course here through our advocacy with the FTP. The reason why this role is so important is because we have to balance the advancement of knowledge creation and application with our other roles as educators, advisors, mentors, leaders of research labs and facilities, communicators of the outcome of our work, advocates for education and research, and stewards, importantly, for the responsible implementation of research programs. We wear administrative hats. A lot of people don't think about that as part of the faculty role, but we do wear administrative hats of our labs and our funded programs, and we're often called to serve on the advancement of our disciplines through working with our professional associations in our respective disciplines, as journal manuscript reviewers, as grant application reviewers. Many of us are rotators as program officers to federal agencies. Some of us wear academic administrative roles as heads of departments, centers, colleges, and yes, research operations at our home institutions. So our roles are complicated, and we're always thinking about how to respond to the changes going on in the research landscape across the United States and internationally. Not only do we share our perspectives here at the FTP about our home institutions, but we also provide as a conduit of information about the specific aspects of our disciplines and how those might be brought to bear in the demonstrations that we pursue and the projects that we undertake. Some of our faculty members are members of the National Academies of Science, Engineering, and Medicine, as well as other nationally recognized academies. And so we also help firm up that relationship with NASM. Many hold prominent positions of leadership in other professional organizations. Some are inventors and have their own startups and bring valuable experience in the commercialization process to the table. This breadth of collective experiences is what provides faculty a unique voice at the FTP so that we can help not only canvas all the activities that are happening, but also to be able to contribute to the scope of demonstrations and the impact of research administrative changes that may happen across our research activities. This is the only organization I know of that brings both the administrative, faculty, and federal voices together in one place towards the betterment of the nation's research enterprise. And that is why so many faculty are dedicated to this organization, despite the fact that it is not focused on our own individual research areas of expertise. In addition to this important role, we have a number of projects in the FTP that we're undertaking. There's a session on science CV. We're deeply connected to the FTP evaluation process. And of course, we are stewarding the faculty workload survey, which provides PIs at our member institutions with the opportunity to share the impacts of administrative requirements on their ability to effectively use federal funding to implement their research programs. We've also been heavily involved in ensuring that our FTP programs resonate across the entire membership, including faculty. And so we think hard about what would be the elements of those programs and how to engage our community. We always have a faculty forum where we can discuss topical issues, and a business meeting where we can deal with the activities that are ongoing at the FTP. And we have those both scheduled in this FTP meeting. And finally, today's plenary focus on artificial intelligence is something many of us are spending lots and lots of time thinking about. We often think about AI from a research, innovation, and education perspective, but today we're going to be looking at AI from the way in which it is integrated into research administration and how it may be able to help streamline processes, enhance decision-making, and bring about overall efficiency in the research enterprise. In addition, we think there are opportunities for AI to be used to assist in various aspects of research proposal development. That's going to be the topic that is going to be discussed here this morning. And we're delighted to be able to introduce Dan Harmon, who is the Director of Data and Systems at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, and he is going to introduce the rest of the panel. So I'll turn it over to Dan. Thank you.
All right. Hopefully everybody can hear me okay. Good morning, everyone. I'd like to thank you for joining us today. Like Michelle said, I'm Director of Data and Systems at Sponsored Programs at the University of Illinois. My coworkers have affectionately started calling me AI Dan because it seems to be all I've been talking about lately. And as a disclaimer, I most definitely didn't use AI to write any of this presentation. We'll touch on that topic of hallucinations later, but I'm joined by the illustrious Rob Pilgrim. Rob is the Associate Director of Data and Strategy and Insights at the Division of Research and Innovation at the University of Arkansas. Rob is so proficient in AI that legend has it he's been personally endorsed by Siri and Alexa as their go-to human for advice. And then last but not least, the remarkable Ashley Benz. Ashley is the Assistant Director of Research Administration Systems and Training at Harvard University School of Engineering and Applied Sciences. Ashley is known for blending the worlds of research administration and AI so seamlessly, even ChatGPT has signed up for her masterclass. All right, now that you've met the dream team, let's talk about AI. Although being around for some time in some form for a while now, in the past year, AI has transitioned from the realm of science fiction straight into our daily lives and has become somewhat of a household name. It's not just a buzzword anymore that tech enthusiasts throw around. It's a revolutionary force that's reshaping all of our industries, sparking innovation and changing the way we work. From virtual assistants that know us better than we know ourselves to smart algorithms that can predict the next big trend, AI is not just popular, it's becoming indispensable. It's becoming intuitive, adaptive, incredibly adept at understanding complex intricacies of human behavior. That being said, I hope you're all excited to hear about AI, so let's take a look at what we have in store for you today. So top of the agenda, Rob is going to give you an overview about AI. And he's going to be discussing some of the tools that you all can use to get started. And then I think he's got some demos to show as well. Then Ashley is going to talk more specifically about some of Harvard's use cases. She's got some demo videos on budget justification writing and on automating document processing. And then I'll finish up with some Illinois use cases. I'll be talking about our workload complexity initiative, and then I'll also give you a demo of how we can use AI to pull in terms and conditions to automatically populate some of our systems. All right, now I'm going to hand it over to Rob to start talking about an overview of AI. And please bear with us, we're going to transition between PowerPoints and some live demos, so hopefully it'll be fairly quick.
Okay, good morning, everybody. Let me just get this set up. So let me do a screen share here. Can you see my screen okay?
Yep.
Good.
Okay. So let me move this out the way. Okay, good morning, everybody. So my name is Robert Pilgrim, and I am with the Division of Research and Innovation at the University of Arkansas here in Fayetteville. So today I want to spend 15 to 20 minutes introducing the concept of chat-based AI. If this is the first time you're seeing it, hopefully you'll learn something new. And if you've seen this before, hopefully this will get you thinking about other ways of leveraging this technology. So a quick overview. So like Dan said, the last 12 months, AI has really exploded onto the scene. Whenever you go online or social media or conferences, it seems to be AI is kind of the main focus. So we're going to quickly see what exactly has happened in the last 12 months and how that can affect you with your current job. And then we're going to switch over to look at some examples. So we're going to kind of do a ChatGPT 101, a very, very simple example. And then we're going to get more specific. So we're going to see how AI can help write a letter of support. How can you use AI to quote unquote talk to a PDF? And I think Ashley will go into more depth on this type of application. How to summarize text. So whether this is a publication, proposal, solicitation, how to pull text out of a document, summarize it, build to-do list and bullet points. And then proposal outline. How can you take a solicitation and some basic information about a faculty member and begin to flesh out a proposal outline using this technology? And then the final slide will be just some concerns about security that you probably should be aware of. So I'm not an expert by any means. Thanks, Dan, for the vote of confidence, but I want to manage expectations. I'm not an expert, but I have spent a lot of time playing around with this stuff. Okay, so the last 12 months, like I said before, it's really exploded onto the scene. It started back in November of 2022 with the release of ChatGPT 3.5. And then a few months later, we had ChatGPT 4 was released. So ChatGPT 4 is the paid for version. It's currently $20 a month, and it's an order of magnitude more powerful. So if you've been playing with this stuff and you're not paying for it, in terms of ChatGPT, you're really missing out because ChatGPT 4 is much more powerful, and we're going to see some examples here in a second. So why was this significant? As it says here, it puts the latest AI technology in the hands of anyone, no coding needed. So you don't need to be a programmer, don't need to know much about AI, you don't need to know machine learning. Anyone with an internet connection and a keyboard can now leverage cutting-edge technology to help them in their day-to-day jobs. So we're going to switch over to some examples here in a second. If you want to follow along, if you have a ChatGPT account, you go ahead and log in and open that in a browser. If not, you can open bing.com/search and follow along. So this, and I'll show you how to get there in a second. So this website actually has a version of ChatGPT built into it that you can use if you want to follow along. So, but before we do, let's just, a way to visualize AI is think of AI as a personal assistant. So it's easy to get caught up in the technology and is it ethical and what is it actually doing behind the scenes. But if you think of AI as a personal assistant, if you had a personal assistant in your office that was with you 24/7, 365, what could you accomplish? What could you offload to that personal assistant in terms of helping you with your workload and work? So just like a human assistant, it's important to provide AI with the relevant data. You have to clearly communicate the task you're trying to do, and we're going to see some examples here in a second. And then you have to provide context. So what do you want? And more specifically, what do you not want when interacting with AI? So I believe there was a file shared earlier on. I think it's in the chat. Yeah, if you open up the chat box, there's actually a PDF with some examples if you want to follow along. If not, I'm just going to show that on the screen. Yeah, there we go. So that PDF file is basically a bunch of prompts that I've made. And what we're going to be doing is we're going to be copying and pasting some of this text into a AI chatbot, and then we're going to be looking at the response that it provides. We're not going to spend too much time looking at the responses, but what I have done is I've made those available here. So, for example, if you wanted to see what the actual response was for this question, what you can do is click this response icon, and that will take you to the actual response that I got a couple of days ago. So yours won't be exactly the same because every time you use this, you get a slightly different answer depending on the wording of the question, but it should be kind of roughly like this. And then to go back, just click go back. So let's start at the beginning. So if you want to follow along, if you go to bing.com/search, you should see something like this. And then what you're going to do is you're going to come over to this chat icon, click it, and then you should see something like this. Okay, so this is bing.com/search, and then click chat. And then this is a typical example of what a chat-based AI interface looks like. So down the bottom, you've got basically where you ask the question, so tell me a joke. And depending on the, and then it should give you the response back. So what we're going to do is start with a very simple kind of 101 example. So I'm going to ask AI to make me a kid story based on the movie Hunger Games, but replace humans with cats. Okay, so what I'm going to do is copy this. And if you want to follow along in a browser, please do. So I'm going to simply copy and paste and then hit send. So one thing to be aware of is, like I said before, the more information you provide AI, the more data, the more context, the more details about what you want, the better your response will be. In this case, I'm giving it just a few words, so it's going to be very generic in terms of its answer. So I've provided 192 characters, but you can have up to 2,000 characters in this particular example. So what I'm going to do is hit send. And then what you're going to see, what you're going to see very quickly again, just a silly example, but I'm gonna freeze the screen here a second so you can read this. So very quickly, it's produced an example just from a basic set of questions. So you can see it's still writing. And when this screen fills up, if you just type continue in the text box below, it will actually continue writing the story. And maybe you want to go into depth. So maybe you want an entire 2,000 words for chapter 1. You can simply say, please write me 2,000 words for chapter 1, and it will reference the previous response and then respond accordingly. So that's just a very basic example. So now let's get more specific. So let's do how to leverage this technology to generate a letter of support. Okay, so what I'm going to do. So if you don't have ChatGPT, you can do this in Bing Chat. So just make sure you click new topic and copy and paste the text here. I'm going to switch over to ChatGPT. I find that to be much more structured in its response. So I'm going to copy this question here. So basically, write me a letter of support for a proposal from a faculty member in chemical engineering. And the proposal title is Optical Probe for Regolith Analysis for Martian Exploration. Okay, so I'm simply going to copy. Again, very generic question. You can do this in Bing Chat, simply copy paste. But I'm actually going to switch this to ChatGPT. I find this to be more useful. So what I'm going to do, again, here's your kind of text box at the bottom. I'm simply going to copy and paste and hit submit. And very, very quickly, Okay, so very, very quickly with minimal effort, you can begin to flesh out a document. Now, obviously, you don't want to just copy and paste this. You want to use this as kind of a scaffold or maybe to get you started. That's all. That's more often the case is it's going from 0 to 1, which is the hardest thing to do when writing documents. It's really getting that initial scaffold or initial outline. So this is a really good way of kind of fleshing out an outline that you can then go back in and edit and play around with. But you see, it's done a pretty good job. And again, if I was to provide more details, maybe I gave some historical background for the faculty member. Maybe I gave it some more keywords I wanted to include in the letter. This would do a really, really good job. And down here, I can have a conversation. So let's say this is a little bit too long. What I can say is, please make this more concise. And what it's going to do, it's going to reference the previous response, and then it's going to kind of reproduce its previous response on my latest question. So what it's done here, it's made this much smaller. So again, it's a good technology just to get you up and running. So let's look at another example here. So what we're going to do here is we are going to learn how to quote unquote talk to a document. So to do this, you need to open Microsoft Edge, the Edge browser, and all Windows machines have that. If you hit the Windows key, then type Edge. Microsoft Edge is the browser I'm currently in at the moment. So if you want to open that, and you can follow along. If not, I can just do this on the screen here. So what I'm going to do is this document is actually, leave it to this one here. I'm sure everyone knows this document like the back of their hand. So this is a 203 page PDF file. And I want to ask it a very simple question. And that question is, what is a downward adjustment and how do I make one? Okay. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to leverage AI to talk to this document. And the way I'm going to do this is Microsoft Edge has a nice feature over here on the top right hand side, this B. And what this is doing is this has ChatGPT built into, oh, that's showing my previous response. Let me just delete that. There we go. So okay, so it looks like it's showing my previous response where I was testing this out, but I'm going to do this again. So what's happening here is this browser has a version of ChatGPT built into the actual browser. And what this does, it allows you to talk to whatever document happens to be open. So in this case, it's a PDF file. It could be a web page. It could be a solicitation or an article or a Microsoft Word file. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask the question, what is a downward adjustment and how do I make one? And then hit submit. So what's happening behind the scenes is it's reading this entire document. It's also reading my question, and then it's trying to answer this question based just on this document that's on the screen here. Sometimes this takes a few seconds to get up and running. Again, this is Microsoft Edge, and you click the B button. So this is a very simple example, and you probably could have just searched for that keyword to find the location of this document, but this allows you to really have a conversation with a document, which you couldn't have done before without this technology. So the first time you use this, you need to initiate this application, and the way you do this is you just pull out this menu, you hit the ... here, which is more options, and then you have to make sure that you have enabled allow access to any web page or PDF. So make sure this is turned on. Once you do this, any web page you have open, you can quote unquote talk to that document using artificial intelligence. Summarizing, let me close this down. Summarizing a solicitation. So again, if you open this in the browser, I want to summarize this particular solicitation. So this solicitation is actually this one here. Could be any solicitation or any web page you want to summarize. So what I'm going to do is, again, you could use the Bing browser, clear this out and simply say summarize this web page, and it will go through and pull out the key points and summarize that pretty quickly. But I'm going to use ChatGPT. So what I've done here is I've actually already copied the text. So I'm going to say summarize this text, and then I just simply copied the text into this little section here. So I'm going to go back to ChatGPT, there we go. And I'm going to make a new chat. And I'm going to copy and paste. So again, I'm just summarizing that particular text, hit send. And you can see very, very quickly, again, this is a very simple example, but imagine if this was a very technical document or a very lengthy document. So let's say it was a technical document and I wanted to explain it in simpler terms. I can say, and I use this a lot, explain this to an 8-year-old, because I have the intellect of an 8-year-old. So again, it does a really good job of simplifying documents. Or maybe you want to pull out key details, summarize, convert to bullet points, or maybe you need it to explain parts of a document to you but you don't quite understand. You essentially can have a conversation with a piece of text or a document, which is really, really handy. And again, if you want to see the actual response in the PDF, you can just click response here and it will show you a previous response. Okay, proposal scaffold. So this is where it gets interesting. So now let's say I want to apply or I want to help make a outline of a proposal for this particular solicitation. Again, you can do this in Bing. I'm going to use ChatGPT. So what I've done is I've copied the text and pasted it here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, you are an expert grant writer. Write your response with an authoritative tone and an academic writing style. Please do not tell me how to do it. I want you to actually do it. Please make me the heading outline of a proposal I want to submit. Here is the solicitation. And the reason I added this part here, please do not tell me how to do it. I want you to actually do it, is I find when you use Bing, it tends to tell you how to do something, whereas sometimes you just want it to do it itself. So I put that extra comment in there and that seems to do the job. So I'm just going to copy this and I'm going to go back to ChatGPT. Again, here's where I think the magic happens. So I'm going to copy this. Again, I've taken the solicitation text from this and I want a proposal scaffold. So I hit send and very, very quickly, again, I didn't really provide much context. I simply said, please make me a proposal scaffold, but I could have been much more specific. Maybe I want to use an NSF guidelines to kind of decide the sections of my proposal. Maybe I have an example proposal I want to use. But you can see how quickly this is really fleshing out this proposal. Okay, and if I switch to the PDF, it's not just a generic template. It really is. Let me zoom in a little bit here. It really is. It's looked at the context and it really has made specific sections relative or related to that particular solicitation. So it's pretty impressive. Again, typically the hardest thing is going from 0 to 1. It's getting that initial scaffold or getting that additional outline. So this does a really, really good job. And now you can go back in and say, well, for this section, please use this text or use this publication as reference. So it really does a really, really good job with very, 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 very little guidance. So really, you are an expert grant writer, and then I've just copied and pasted the text. And then finally, I think we got one more example here. Let me go back to the proposal scaffold. So this is a really good example. So now I want to use a actual real proposal. So if you click this link, this should take you to this page here. So this is a proposal. I don't know this person. This is his website, but what he's done, he's made available some of his NSF proposals as well as his feedback. So that's pretty nice. So if you want to play around with this stuff and see if you could use it to help improve proposals or leverage feedback to help improve your proposals, you can use this website to get his proposals, because this is all public. He's put this in a publicly accessible place. So let's go back to our text. So one thing to note here before we look at this is this is a very generic prompt. I'm simply going to say, suggest some changes, show me the original, show me your suggestions, and then tell me why you are making these changes. Okay, so very generic, very not very specific, but it does a pretty good job. So let me just, again, you can do this in ChatGPT. Come over here and you can copy paste the text into here, but I'm going to stick with ChatGPT. So what I'm going to do is I am going to close this. I'm going to copy my question. Please suggest changes. Then I'm going to come down and just copy the text. So I basically copied the first 2 chapters. I'm going to go to ChatGPT, start a new chat. Okay, let me zoom out a little bit. Okay, so just to recap before we see this in work. So please suggest changes, show me the original and the new, tell me why you're making these changes, put this into a table, okay? And then here's the text below. So here we go. Let me zoom in a little bit. Again, you notice they're very generic changes, mostly around English and structure and clarity, but that's simply because I didn't really give it much context or much other information to go by. If I was more specific in what I wanted, it would be much more specific in its feedback. But as you can see, this is pretty impressive. If you had to hire someone or had to read this yourself to make grammatical improvements or suggestions, this would take quite a lot of time, but this is still going. And this was just the first 2 chapters. So this is really, really powerful. And again, if you want to actually see the actual feedback, if you go to the PDF that was shared, hit response, and then I put this into a table. So it's pretty impressive when you think about it, what it's doing and the speed at which this is working. So let me go back. So I think that's all of the examples. Yep. So let me go back to the slide deck and let me just go to say one word on security. So that's kind of, I went over that pretty quickly, but I wanted to cover a few examples. So let me just say one word on security, then I hand this over to, I believe Ashley is next. So security obviously is a very, if not one of the most important factors when dealing with AI. In fact, this morning I read in the news that Microsoft had a breach a couple of years ago. They found in one of their AI data centers that exposed a bunch of data. So you don't want to use this stuff and then, you know, find your data in a data breach later on down the line. So the way this works is whenever you're dealing with at least chat-based AI is you're writing prompts and providing data over here on the right-hand side is you're interacting with AI and it's sending responses back. But also behind the scenes, potentially it's taking your data, storing your data, and then it's training your data to improve the AI experience. So this is kind of a gray area. I know ChatGPT and other platforms are really focusing on securing your data, but you should really check. I know ChatGPT does have a 30-day retention policy, but I would not share any super sensitive or classified information with ChatGPT. Always kind of remove any identifiable information. That being said, Microsoft has or is about to release a 100% secure version of Bing Chat, and it's called Bing Chat Enterprise. So this is being rolled out to institutions. If you have an A5 faculty license, if you're using Microsoft on your campus, you probably have an A5 license. So beginning of next month, I believe by default, Bing Chat AI will be 100% secure, meaning you should see this enterprise logo, this green protected. As long as you're logged in with your university details, you should see this in a couple of weeks. And again, don't take my word for it. So please read the website. But as far as I understand, this data is 100% secure, doesn't get stored, and is removed as soon as you X out of that web browser your data goes. So it should be safe to use for more sensitive information. So again, that's the A5 faculty license, and it should be rolling out beginning of December. Yeah, so that's kind of the end of my part of the talk. And then just to jokingly, but kind of not jokingly, is speak nicely to AIs. It may one day be your boss, and that is not too far of a stretch in the coming years. So that's it. Feel free to reach out. Again, I went pretty quickly through these examples, but the PDF and this slide deck, which I'll share, should give you some more details if you like. So let me stop sharing my screen. All right, who's next?
We'll give Ashley a sec while she gets her screen ready.
Thanks, Rob. So I'm at the department level, so I see a lot of the daily uses and needs for this generative AI. And kind of going off of what Rob said, I want to point out some folks that kind of asked about solicitations. One of the things you can do really well with the sidebar and solicitations is if you pull open a solicitation and you have the sidebar open, you can ask Bing to chat to summarize your solicitation. If you use the word summarize, it will explain like the point of the program, which is not particularly helpful for folks at the department level. What you can do though, is you can actually ask it to create a checklist for you. And in particular, I did this recently with an NSF proposal where we were submitting to a specific track, right? So we wanted to say, please make a checklist for the dev track of the solicitation that's in this page. You always need to say this page, otherwise Bing will search the entire internet. So just make sure you reference this PDF or this page in order to get it to use this portal. Another thing you can do, which I couldn't show because of security issues, but you can also use that feature to summarize things like terms and conditions. So I have a case where there's a lengthy agreement. We're a sub, and I wanted to ask what happens in the event of a disagreement over IP, right? And so you can have it look through those terms and conditions, and it doesn't have to be fully OCR'd. Sometimes my sponsor notices don't have the OCR, the optical character recognition applied, and it still works in those cases. So I highly recommend using the sidebar in Edge. It's a more secure environment. So it's part of that enterprise environment that institutions pay for. So you're able to use this kind of data in that environment. That is not true of ChatGPT. So two cases that I'm going to show you with a video demo, as Dan had mentioned, are how to write budget justifications more efficiently and some automated document processing using supervised learning. So writing the budget justification is a very onerous process. For me, travel in particular is very complicated. I tend to ask for roughly $10,000 a year for my computer science folks to travel because that is an important part of their budget. I spend probably 2 to 3 hours on this part to make sure that it gets fully documented. That's very time consuming, and I'd like to pull that effort down. And what's great about the Bing sidebar is that it is connected to the internet and it can look up information for us and cite its sources. We can also ask vague questions and get specific details back, for example, prices. But make sure you always check the sources that it provides and make sure that the information that's pulling is actually correct. So in this example, I already have this pre-recorded, so it's going to go a little fast. But you've seen how the chat bar works from Rob's demos. I'm going to use a different conversation style. I'm going to click on more creative. I find that for this type of exercise, it's actually more helpful than if you use more balanced or more precise. And you can see that I'm going to actually type it, something that has a typo. That will not impede the ability for it to understand what I'm saying. I also did not explain what ICML is. Now it's doing multiple searches at the same time. It's understanding that ICML is a conference. I didn't say where ICML would be, but you can see it returns Vienna, Austria. I also had mentioned that this is an NSF proposal. I didn't mention Fly America Act, but it clearly understands Fly America as it has brought in the city pair program. It's pulling open registration fees. It's talking about tutorials, conference sessions, workshops, and virtual pass. These are things I may not have known. I have to think about. It's giving me options for hotels. Meals and incidentals, it's bringing up the GSA rates for me. It's talking about 75% of the per diem rate for the travel days. And it finally summarizes all of those numbers for me in a nice, easy format. I can continue this conversation because it is a conversation, so it remembers that we were just talking about travel. I ask it to continue writing the justification. I didn't give it specifics on PI salary, for example, so it just guessed a number. I asked it to use Harvard fringe rates, and you can see it's cited one right here for me, 21.5%, and it has a citation on OSP's website. It has brought down those details from travel that I requested. And I had said M&S, and it has correctly interpreted that to mean materials and supplies. The indirect cost rate at 69%, it's saying is the Harvard rate, again cited. And it's mentioning our MTDC and how that is composed. And I want to point out that it's doing this all in the federal order. So it goes salary, fringe, travel, materials and supplies, and then indirect costs. So as it points out, you should check this information. I can click on a link here. It will bring that up in the side. And then I can scan and see if that information is here. It's actually not on this page, it's on the side. And you can see that it's pulling the number 21.5 from academic university area. Now it's up to me to know my institution to know if that answer is correct. It actually is correct. But it's possible it would get that wrong. And you can see why. I didn't say this is university area. Harvard has a more complex arrangement here. It is possible that I'd have to give it better information, such as if I'm at the School of Public Health. The 69% overhead rate is also correct. And again, if I needed it to choose a different rate, I should indicate that in my prompt. Okay, so you can continue that conversation on with the bot and get it to refine its answer. And then you can obviously move forward from there. I have found that this actually helps my research time tremendously because I'm often trying to get a base estimate to begin my travel justifications. And this takes off a lot of that workload. The next example I want to talk about is automated document processing. And that uses what is called supervised learning. This is a form of AI that allows you to label information or pictures automatically by first providing the AI with examples. The AI will learn how to explain what each thing is. It's going to be able to look at the examples, learn how to predict what the example is and what label it needs to be provided. So if you think about it, can you figure out if something is a triangle, a square, a circle? Do you need a strict definition to know when you see it, if it's a triangle or a circle? That's what supervised learning is doing. If you provided enough examples of a triangle, enough examples of a circle, it can figure out why it would be called a triangle, why it would be called a circle, right? And then it can start to attach those labels automatically. So you have your labels and your labeled data that you put into the machine, right, the AI. It's going to organize those, right? So now it says, oh, when there's no edges, it's a circle. When there's 3 edges, it's a triangle. When there's 4 edges that are all the same size, it's a square, right? If it's 4 edges but not the same size, it's a rectangle, right? And then once the model is comfortable with this information, that's what we call training the model. You're teaching it. Then you can run test data through it where there is no label. And the model will now output predictions. So it should see that triangle and call it a triangle for you. It should see a circle and call it a circle. So how can we use supervised learning in research administration? So anything that we want to label can be automated. So in particular, reading documents that are highly structured, like FTP subcontract forms, invoices, for example, from subcontracts, sponsor notices, or any document that is generated in an automated way, maybe internal notices. You could also use this with receipts. There are some models that they have pre-trained to help you with things like invoices and receipts. So why would we do this? So if you are labeling the documents, you can then extract that information and process it automatically. For example, you could create an Excel spreadsheet that compiles a list of your notices with only the specific fields that you care about. The amendment number, award number, dates, dollars, if there's carry forward, things like that. You can automatically write emails with that key information, for example, to administrators or to PIs. The tools that you're going to need to do this are in the Microsoft environment, specifically Power Automate and Microsoft Flow. You will very likely need to contact your IT department to get access to these tools. Some folks have like a trial version of Power Automate that's already kind of booted up. You'll have to go to your app drawer in your Microsoft 365 environment to find Power Automate and Microsoft Flow. So Power Automate is the tool that will do the labeling and create the model. And then Flow is going to be what allows us to move that data out of the model and into a format we want to use, like a spreadsheet or an email. If you want to use something like a spreadsheet, you'd have to create that in advance, right? And then you would structure your thinking so you know what you're pulling out. So the full process to do this is that you label your data, you click train model, then the model takes like maybe 10 or 15 minutes to learn everything you want it to learn. And then you set up the flow to dump the data from the model into a spreadsheet or an email or something. Okay, so I'm going to kind of run through it quickly in this video. I understand that it is, only a few minutes for this presentation. It takes longer to learn how to do this in the moment, but I wanted to emphasize that it actually is all point and click. To Dan's earlier point, there isn't coding involved here. This is really just, I'm going to label some fields and the AI will figure out how to extrapolate that to the future. So the app drawer is in the top left corner of Microsoft. So I'm in Power Automate. I click on AI models. If I make a new AI model, it's going to give me some examples, like I can automatically use a pre-trained model. In the case of an FTP form, which is what I'm going to use today, I have to make my own model. So I'm going to use a structured document, which means it always comes out the same way. I'm going to add some fields. This model is already existing, so I'm editing it. You can just name the fields you want. I'm going to put in a text field. This one's going to be called carry forward. Once I have all the fields I want, I can just click next. Now it's going to ask me to make collections of documents. Every form type has to have its own collection. So I already have one form type. I need to make a second collection for this new FTP form type. They cannot be similar. They have to be the same form type so that it learns how to read the form correctly. You need at least 5 examples. So I'm going to pick 5. Once it's done uploading, it's then going to move me over to labeling these documents. I'm going to name this something a little more helpful than collection 1. Okay, so now you can see my document here. It's kind of loading it in for me, all 5. So the top section is our to-do list. We have to label all 5 documents so that it knows consistently where to look. And the fields we're going to label are on the side. If the field is not present on this page, there's a little 3-dot setting that we can say it's not present. Okay, so all you do is you roll over the field you want to label and you click on it, right? This one's a little tricky because it's small. And then you just pick the field name that I've already set up. So it's very simple. And in this case, I don't want all of the data on this form. I really am trying to compile a very concise list of information. And if you happen to click the wrong thing, you can go back and relabel it. If you needed to add new fields, you could edit the model just like we had previously done. Okay, and then I have one more field. So I'm going to scroll down. Here's my carryover. Okay, and then you just move to the next file. So let's say I've gone through all 5 files and I'm all set. Everything is consistently marked. Now this is where you would click train model. So I want to show you with a file that was similar to the model that was already trained. So I'm uploading a test file. You can see this form looks different, right? There's some bullets and everything here, some radio buttons. So when I train this file on the pre-trained model, everything looks great. it can consistently find this information. The start and end dates are pulling out correctly. The total amount obligated to date is correct, right? This form doesn't have carry forward at the bottom, so it's not there. Now, this is using the new form I made with the model before I trained it. So it doesn't look the same, and thus the AI will not know really how to read it. And this is going to be why you want to make separate collections for all of the different FTP forms, for example. So here we only have 4 fields that were found. Let's check them. That's correct. This one, that is not accurate. That is not total obligated to date. Board number is correct. My dates are not found. Amount funded, this action is correct. But then total funds obligated to date was missed, right? So it's important to train the models for the specific form that you're looking at. And once you've done this, though, it's really simple. That's all it takes. It's only like 15 minutes to do something like that, like an FTP style form, which is really consistent. And it comes back with like a 99% score. And then that means it will be incredibly accurate every single time. So once that information is labeled, right now, this is where we can get it into another vehicle and actually use that data. And the main way to do this is Microsoft Flow. I'm not going to work through how to do that here because it's very specific to your own environment. Do you use OneDrive? Do you use Dropbox? Do you have it stored on a Google Drive? All of these things are connectors into Microsoft Flow, and then you can reference that information, pull out the content, right? You can see here, I said, use the data that is in this folder on my OneDrive, in this folder. Then pull out the PDF documents and get the file content from this AI model, the one I just trained, and then store it into a Excel file that I already made on my OneDrive for Business. Find the table notices, add a new row, and then in each of the columns you can see here listed, dump in the information from the model, and these are the fields that we had just trained. And so you can see I do the one-to-one matching. And then every time I add a file, that's what this says, when a file is created in this folder, this flow will run and add a new table and dump in that information. And so in this way, you know, you can actually process information very quickly and look at it in a cohesive context. And I think this is really important when we're looking for things like amendment numbers, which sometimes I've seen people have entered in the same amendment number. They're probably using amendment 8 as their template. They forget to go and change it to amendment 9. And so they send over to amendment 8s. You know, using this sort of methodology would reveal to you in that spreadsheet that there are 2 amendment 8s, and we need to contact our sponsor and have that amendment changed to 9 so that it's accurate. So this is one way you can use supervised learning for document processing. Other examples, as I noted, for example, receipts and invoices would also be an option.
Sorry, I was muted for a sec. Thank you, Ashley. I could tell you are a good trainer in your job because those examples and training videos were well done. So I've definitely taken notes on those. All right. So the first thing I do want to mention about getting started with AI, if you haven't done so already, I would work with your department or your college or university to start an AI working group. I mean, this is a great way to put your heads together and to just brainstorm, you know, what are the different use cases in your department or college to use some of these tools. I know in our case, we put together a working group several months ago, and we just included all the different teams in our organization, at least one representative from each of those teams to bring their ideas to the table. And we actually use AI in that working group to develop the agenda, the talking points, things like that. So we're getting comfortable using that. So that's a great way to get started. And you'll notice my image over here. This is This is using another AI tool called Midjourney. This is image generation, and I just asked it, create a AI working group built with misfit robots, and that's what it came out with. So that's just another tool in your toolbox for getting started with AI. All right, Ashley, you want to go to the next slide? Okay, so at Illinois, we've started this weighted workload distribution project. We hear from staff all the time that they're overwhelmed, but we don't have the data to back it up. As everyone knows, pure volume in and of itself is not responsible for overwhelming staff, but rather how complicated a project is, award or proposal is to manage, negotiate, audit, et cetera, et cetera. It really depends on the project. It's not only about volume. So I've asked this question from institutions around the country for the last couple of years. How are you getting complexity metrics? The ones who do have an answer, which were very few, they're doing it on a spreadsheet and they're kind of manually coming up with the weights. But how do you really know what makes a project complicated? And once you've decided on the factors, how do you know what weight to give to each factor? This is where AI comes in, and this is specifically more traditional machine learning classification algorithms, similar to what Ashley just presented, more supervised training algorithms. And we can use that to figure out what variables and weights to use in order to develop a model that we can then use in our data analytics to see how appropriately we are distributing workload, how appropriately we're staffed, and to be able to give data to leadership to say, hey, we're overwhelmed, here's the data to back it up. I think we need more staff. So please give us more money. All right, Ashley, next slide. So I want to spend a little time on this slide to give you a better sense of what I'm talking about. We kind of like what Ashley said, we start with our training inputs. We need to train the model first. We want to say, if we have this combination of variables, we should get this output. This means we need lots of training data. So how do we get this training data? In our case, we went to each of our teams, did brainstorming sessions on different data points we could use that I want to emphasize may have an impact on complexity. And usually they came back with like 15 to 20 different data points. And in order to translate these data points into a complexity model, we need to define a target metric. In our case, we just came up with a score between 1 and 3. We started with 1 to 5, but it became too fine-grained for the smaller sample size we had. Then we had our staff just go in, we gave them a list of grants, and they scored those grants, gave it a 1 to 3, 1 being least complex, 3 being most complex. And then by merging these scores with the data points that we pulled from our data sets, we get our training data. And I want to touch on a key point behind the scenes. You really need to invest in good data infrastructure to make this process as easy as possible. We've spent time on ours, and now we have all the data points at our fingertips in a single location, very flat, and it's very easy to use. All right, this is also, I want to touch upon this. This is not the most optimal way to go about it if you're using AI. In a perfect world, we just have skipped that brainstorming session and just fed all of our data points in as training data. However, because of the high number of permutations this would create, it would require a much higher sample size and a lot more staff time to square the data. We're very sensitive about our staff time being used for this, so we want to make it as simple on them as possible. All right, so let's move over to this middle section here. And this is where you can start seeing AI creating AI with auto ML. You used to need to be a data scientist to do some of this stuff, but with auto ML, I just feed it our data, I give it a target metric, and it cycles through thousands of different machine learning algorithms, along with different combinations of features and parameters to create thousands of different models. Then you'll see over on the right, it then ranks those by accuracy, giving you an idea of what the best model is. All right, Ashley, next slide, please. Now, once we've got that model, we need to know if it makes sense. We can look at what it thinks are the most important factors. Does your staff agree, and why not? This is actually a fairly well dispersed model, but in some of the models we've produced, only really 4 or 5 variables had any impact at all. This tells me that some of the things we think make something complicated don't actually have any effect at all, or they're captured as part of some other variable. This is why this approach is so much better than a manual approach, with the Excel spreadsheet and trying to manually come up with those weights. We would have spent so much time weighting these variables that may have not, they may have all pointed to the same base variable. For example, we have a variable for sponsor type, such as, state of Illinois, or whether it's a foreign award. We also have another variable for whether it requires invoicing documentation. Well, it turns out all Illinois sponsors have the same invoicing documentation requirement, which we may not have thought about in our manual process, but with AI, it was able to kind of determine that that other variable didn't actually make any difference at all. And now that we have this initial model, we iterate. We run new examples through, having the model score them. We take those scores back to our staff. They can correct any inaccurate scores, thereby training the model some more. Similar to like Netflix or Spotify, when you give a thumbs up or thumbs down, you're training that model to be more accurate. So then after about 2 or 3 of these iterations, we're now at about 99% accuracy, and our training data set is much more robust. Next slide, Ashley. All right, so now that we've got the model, and now we've got the data coming out of that model, now we can start making executive decisions based on this data. By automating this entire process and then pulling it into a BI tool like Power BI or Tableau, we now have a high-level snapshot to ensure that we're balanced and appropriately staffed. If you look at some of these metrics, the bottom left there, that is purely grant count. Yeah, it may not make much sense right now because I've masked the names of people just to avoid any case they're on this call. But you would actually see that the bottom left is the pure grant count, that's pure volume. And then the top left is actually when we add the weights in there that this model came up with. And these actually flop around quite a bit. So you can tell, who's just doing pure volume and who's actually doing complexity. And then over at the right, we can map, average complexity by person. The first 2 are actually associate directors, so that makes sense. They're doing the most complicated stuff. And then it goes down from there depending on the staff title. And then we can view some of these scores over time. You can do time series analysis now that you have the data. So we can see that over time, our overall complexity is actually going down a little bit. But it turns out the average complexity per grant is going up. All right, so right now we've got this model for one team, but we're trying to work on this to roll it out to all the other teams. The difficult point is to just figure out how to pull in all of the data points that we need. And there's some teams that we found that we just don't capture the right data. And this is where some of this new generative AI stuff comes in. We can feed our documents, our proposal documents, our award documents. We can feed that into a large language model and ask it questions, ask it to pull out some of these non-traditional data points that we currently don't capture in our systems. And then we can use those as part of these metrics to help build a model. All right, Ashley, next slide. All right. I hope you like my AI generated researcher who just got an award. You could tell it's AI generated here because the words on that page just they're not actual words, it's just gibberish. So Ashley talked about using AI for structured documents where you kind of know where everything's going to be. I'm going to use AI using the Bing chat feature to pull stuff out of, more documents that you may not know what's going to come like. I'm thinking non-federal awards where all the vendors have their own different way of doing things. So let's demo that. Let me share my screen real quick. Sec. All right, this is an award that we have that I just picked randomly, and then I double checked with certain people to make sure that I can actually share it in here because our non-federal awards are a little more sensitive than our federal awards, which are generally openly available on the internet anyway. So I've opened this, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to paste a prompt in here. And Ashley talked about the different conversation styles. I'm going to go with more precise because I want this answer to be accurate. I don't care how creative it is because really what I want to do is get the right information out of here. And for those of you who want to learn a new term today, that conversation style in the AI world is called temperature. So different temperatures mean different precision levels if you're more worried about being creative versus being precise. So I've got this prompt in here and I say, using the current document, tell me the sponsor of this agreement, the title of the grant, the total budgeted amount, the PI, and the start and end dates. So notice those don't actually line up. Those terms don't actually line up with specific terms in here, but let's see if it's able to pull out that information. So I'm gonna hit go. Telling us it's searching this page, not the internet. All right, so I found the sponsor, IFPRI, the International Food Policy Research Institute. Highlight bolded the title of the grant, which I asked it for. Total budgeted amount, $572,000, which is correct. The PI, I actually couldn't find this information when I was just scanning through it, the PI, and it pulled it out and it knew exactly who that was. And then the start and end dates here. So what if we want to do this at scale? Kind of like Ashley said, what if we want to feed this data into our system? So let's just tell it, I'm gonna paste this. And so I'm still chatting with, and I'm just going to tell it to give that to me in JSON format. For those of you who don't know, JSON format is just a way to structure data so that it's easier to feed into systems. And it's code. It's code that we can just feed into some sort of automated system and pull it in right there. It's just perfectly structured. So what we can do with this, all of these big AI models have some sort of API to call their chat service programmatically. For the non-technical folks, API in this case, it's just a web address that we can call in an automated way by a robot or something. We can provide the input just like a form, and it will respond with output like this in the JSON format that allows our systems to then save it to our database without a human being being involved at all. Of course, we'd want somebody to monitor it. This being unstructured data, sometimes it's not going to bring back the accurate information. But what we would do in our case is we'd put it in some sort of queue for people to go with. These are the new awards that came in. These are the data points that came in. Somebody can just manually go through and kind of verify that it looks accurate, hit submit. This is much less effort than having to scroll through, this is like what, a 22-page document. Some of these are much longer, having to scroll through those and manually enter in terms and agreement information, in a manual way. Another thing to remember, also, Robert touched on this, that we don't want to send this data to public AI systems such as ChatGPT or Bard. I don't think anybody's mentioned Bard yet. That's Google's version of AI. We're actually using Azure OpenAI for some of our stuff. This is our own version of ChatGPT. That data never leaves our subscription. I also, as of like 3 weeks ago, I think ChatGPT just released their enterprise version. That's also kind of similar. The data never leaves your subscription. It's never used to train the rest of the ChatGPT's data. So some universities are starting to invest in this. Other universities are starting to invest in the OpenAI version. I think Michigan just launched like a university GPT system based on Azure OpenAI. If anybody wants to take a look at that, I think that's on their website somewhere. So I think that's a good model for where we're starting to go. And kind of this example is a good example. I met with a big ERA software vendor yesterday, and we were talking about this. And they're trying to integrate this, just what I talked about, pulling the terms and information out of documents. They're trying to integrate that into their software products so that, we're not trying to do this. We're not trying to recreate the wheel. So I'm excited for the direction that's coming. I think that will save all of us in the research administration field a lot of time doing this manual data entry. All right, next slide, Ashley. Oh, it's not. I think the only slide we had left was the Q&A slide. So that's all for the demos and the talks, but I think we're ready to handle some questions, and hopefully we'll have some answers for you all.
Thank you so much, Dan, Robert, and Ashley, for these very insightful presentations. I think we have a few minutes for Q&A, and many others have been answered along the way. I'm going to jump in with one from Jonathan K., who said that it should be mentioned that NIH forbids the use of AI for grant review, at least for now, because of the security issues. And that kind of resonates with some of this proprietary conversation that was raised. But Joan Sear asks, if all are using ChatGPT to write documents, won't reviewers read very similarly worded and structured documents and possibly see it as, I like her word, plagiaristic?
I think that's a good point. And that's kind of where I think we've all kind of touched upon it. Use this as a tool for helping frame your thoughts and come up with like a template or basic structure. Don't just copy and paste, whatever it says, into your information. Use it just like you would a person, like Rob said, like a personal assistant to get feedback from. You're just trying to get a basic starting point and use it as you would a colleague to see what they have to say about it. I would definitely discourage you from just cutting and pasting responses into something you're going to send out to somebody. Rob, Ashley, any other comments?
Yeah, definitely. Just to echo Dan's point, think of it more as a personal assistant helping to improve your writing style. So definitely don't just copy and paste and, paste that into a document, because that obviously is not ethical. But yeah, just a personal assistant.
I also want to differentiate between documents that are authored, right? Like, so a grant proposal has the PI's names attached to it. That's very different than a budget justification or a facilities page where no specific author is attached to those documents, right? So I think it's a little bit easier to copy and paste, a select paragraph from a budget justification than for a scientific document. I don't think those are actually on par, as it's not assumed that the PI is actually writing those administrative documents anyways.
Thank you. There's a question from my colleague, Kernal Challara, for Dan. Mm-hmm. Can a process be created to automatically open documents, scroll through, and create JSON output?
So what you would do is you wouldn't need to specifically open them. You would just feed the documents into through a web API. Similar to what I was talking there about the end, we actually have a team here at the university that's taking our documents, they're extracting all the text and throwing it into a big blob text field into a database so that we can then pull and feed through these APIs to get data from. It's not exactly opening the document and then running the AI service against it. It's more all automated, just extracting text, feeding that into these AI models, and then getting the output. That you're going to need, if you're not technically savvy and you don't have access to some of these tools, we'll need, technology support for that.
I put a link to the OpenAI API in the chat for you to explore, but yeah, you probably will need some conversations with your IT department for some of this stuff, or some skills in like Python or another language.
Yep. And you can use AI to write the Python for you. So maybe you don't need a tech person if you just use AI to help you figure that out.
You would need a private license though, I think, right? And then you can't put secure data through that.
Yep.
Thank you. I noticed that Aubrey West has her hand up, so I've given her the wherewithal to ask that if she decides to do so. In the meantime, I'm moving to Carol Lund's question. What research training is required to leverage these tools in an office of research? I'm sorry, what training is required? Is there an online course available, or did most of you teach yourselves how to do all of this? I think we're all curious to know, how did you get so knowledgeable in this area?
I'll go first. I have a computer science background, so I kind of, knew machine learning and deep learning stuff before these AI models came out. The complexity model stuff, actually, we started before ChatGPT even came out. But it's this new generative AI stuff. I'm just curious about it. So I just started playing with it from day one, subscribing to newsletters and just kind of attending webinars and things like that interest me. I know if you go, so our campus has a license to LinkedIn Learning, so there's some stuff on there if you want to take a look. YouTube is just a great example too. I mean, you just Google anything you want about AI and there's going to be YouTube videos on it. So take a look. All the information you need is out there. You just have to, be curious and willing to go find it.
Yeah, I would agree with that. A lot of the technology that I use in my job is really just from spending the time with it. I train a lot of people. I have about 25 people in my group that I train in research administration. I spend a lot of time watching people work. And even, basic Excel skills takes time, just sitting there trying something and seeing if it'll work out. And I do realize that a lot of folks in research administration feel they don't have time. I recently surveyed my entire team about if they'd be willing to learn AI. And about 20 out of 25 people said, absolutely, I just have no time. And so there's this trick, right? How do I make time? Well, AI is that way to kind of make time. You have to be kind of thoughtful, right, about how you're doing it. So that's why I gave the example of the budget justification. That is the sort of thing where I'm in the middle of writing it and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is taking forever. I don't really want to take a shortcut because I'm very proud of my work. And I feel like I do a good job defending every dollar, and we don't get our travel budgets cut, even though they're very large. But I am spending a lot of time on doing things like looking up conference fees. And that type of work can instantly be halved or quartered, right? There is no reason for me to have to search the web by hand and look up ICML's website to find a conference fee. Those links are generated to bring me right to the page where I can do my own research quickly, but at least I'm finding the right places to go. There's like the links in documents that like Dan showed with the notice of award type of deal. It'll say on line 7 on page 12, you can just click right there and read it yourself. But, you know, a lot of times it can be difficult to pull information out, like the name of the PI that Dan showed. That was probably listed in the context of something, right? The person responsible for this proposal will be, right? The AI understands that that is the same thing as the PI, right? You can't easily do a search for that. The same thing like with reading complex BAAs. I do a lot of DARPA solicitations, right? I can't tell you how difficult it can be to quickly find information because they use price proposal, cost proposal, volume 2, right? Like there's budget justification. It's like, how do I get to that information quickly? That is where I think most people today can get started. You don't have to do really complex things. You don't have to contact IT. Just get started on that basic frustration factor that you have. And just don't be afraid, I think is the main hesitation most folks have.
And then just quickly to add to that, so from a ChatGPT perspective, which is kind of where I spend most of my time, just playing around with it. You can use this in all areas of your life, not just your work, whether you're learning a new skill or trying to teach something to your kid or got a question about your tax returns. You can use this technology absolutely anywhere in your life. And it's definitely worth $20 a month just to have that available. I would pay probably a couple of $100 a month just to have access to this technology. It's really changing everything.
And you can use ChatGPT to put together a training guide for it. So, like you just say, put me a detailed training guide. I want to learn this, this, and this. And I mean, it does a great job. I've seen really good examples on the internet of it, creating that. Especially for kids learning. It's like this is going to affect your kids too. I mean, it's going to be a private tutor for them that doesn't get tired, doesn't get sick of their questions, and that's always available. And I think it's really going to equalize the education landscape, in that regard.
All right, it looks like we're all out of time. I wanted to express our gratitude to Dan, Robert, and Ashley. This was a fascinating conversation, and I'm sure there'll be many more in this area. Just a reminder, we're going to take a short 30-minute break, and at 1 o'clock, we'll have our federal agency updates. Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
everyone.